Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Charlie Key. This is Richard Key. Two of the guys from Modules. Modules is a Node.js hosting platform. I'm not here to talk about that, though. What I am here to talk about is basically I want to get all of you excited to go back and hack on some Node when you leave this session. So what does that mean? That means, one, we'll talk a little bit about what it is very quickly. Two, we want to show you some of the cool shit you can do with Node. And that's a big part of what we think is really cool about Node is the range of what you can do with it and all of the different ways you can kind of apply that knowledge that you have in JavaScript to build all kinds of sweet applications. So why Node.js? Well, we're looking at a technology that has yet to hit 1.0 soon. And, well, who's using it today? So, all right. Richard's also going to talk a little bit about some of the companies that are using it today.
So Node.js is not in 1.0. So some people out there I've heard say, well, is it stable? Well, I have a little bit of a list here of companies using Node.js. Walmart, LinkedIn, eBay, PayPal, Yahoo, Yammer, Microsoft Square, Clout, LearnBoost, Dow Jones, Medium, Twitter, Rdio, Loggly, and Cloud9, just to name a few. You may have heard some companies like Microsoft and Walmart on there. And LinkedIn is actually using Node.js for their entire mobile backend. That's their entire API is running through Node.js. So it's actually a lot of companies are starting to adapt Node.js, and a lot of companies are starting to see the power of Node.js. And it's not even 1.0 yet. So right there, we can see that Node.js is being used by a lot of different people. And as you can tell, it's pretty stable if companies like that are starting to use it. I think Charlie has something cool to show, though, don't you?
So kind of just to get us kicked off, we want to show a little bit of some of the stuff you can do with it. The simple world of a command line. What we've got is, we'll just kind of run it and see here. So we're just going to run a small little JavaScript file here. And what we've got is actually, we've got a picture showing up in our console. So what does this look like? On the right, you can actually see the code that we're running to make this happen. It's 14 lines. 14 lines of code, and we took a picture of a My Little Pony and put it into our console. Now, what's it doing in this code? Well, we're just doing an HTTP request. We're going to grab that picture. We're going to transform it into ASCII art, and then we're going to drop it into our console. And literally, you can look here on line 11, and that kind of sums up the entire thing. Now, we get a lot of this functionality because of a lot of the great things people are doing with modules and NPM, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we're going along. But that's just the start of kind of what we can do with Node.js. Richard's going to talk a little bit about what is Node.js and how's it help us and how do you use it.
All right, back to me. All right, so Node.js. So Node.js is a little bit different from some of the technologies that are out there right now. And one of the things that you see, what the heck is going on? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So if this image did load, it would be an image of V8. And what's really neat about Node.js is at its core, it's really just a wrapper around Google's V8. And what this means is that it's basically just a JavaScript interpreter. As you can imagine, you can do lots of different things with just a JavaScript interpreter you can run kind of from the command line. Now, what Node.js does for you is it wraps all of these other modules that you can use right out of the box. And this is really at the core of what Node.js kind of the paradigm is modules. Not one big Apache server that has everything you ever need ever, or something like that. It's just a JavaScript interpreter, and you have modules that are included with that. And of course, you can install other modules from something called Npm. And you have things right out of the box like an HTTP server, pretty self-explanatory. You have file system access, which is really neat. You can do some pretty cool stuff with file system access. And you also have various other utilities like string formatters, because everybody likes string formatters, right? You need those. And it's really just all of these modules are bundled together with Node.js. And that's really where the power comes from when you're talking about creating a Node.js server. Now, this diagram is a little bit crazy, but what this does is this is a diagram of how Node.js works really on the back end of things. What's one of the things that really draws people to Node.js is that it's non-blocking. Now, what that means is when you have something like Ruby, what happens when a request comes into a Ruby server is it stops doing everything else to handle that request, meaning that thread is blocked. You cannot do anything else on that thread. What Node.js does is it creates this thing that that's called an event loop, and that's that thing in the middle. So what happens when a request comes in, or you're doing anything else, doing some sort of operation in Node.js? What happens is that operation is sent to an event queue, and this event loop loops around and gives those events to something to process it. So file system, stuff like that. And eventually what happens is instead of blocking a thread altogether, you can do multiple things at multiple times, which is always nice. And this actually gives you the ability, if we're talking about a server, to handle lots of requests all at the same time. Now, on the flip side, something like Ruby or something that's blocking, what ends up happening is you have to handle multiple threads at once yourself. Node.js does this on the back end for you, and if you've ever tried to do that, it's very difficult to do it yourself. It can be a very pain to do that. Now, this is going to be just a short example of something of a difference that is between Node.js and something else. So in a traditional technology, or something like Ruby or something like that, what you have is you have some I/O. And after you're done with I/O, you want to do some database stuff. And so you do some database stuff. And then you have one last thing that you do a little bit of something else. Now, what happens if you want to do that little bit of something else while these other things are happening? Well, you can't traditionally. Without something like Node.js or some complicated code that you write yourself to manage threads, you cannot do that unless you're using Node.js. Oh, and by the way, Sonic doesn't like to wait. Now, let's take a look at what it would look like in Node.js. So right off the bat, there's something really different about this. What's happening here is we're calling do some I/O, but instead of passing in some file handler or something like that, we're passing in a function. And for those of you who don't know, this function is referred to as a callback. Now, what this is going to do is when this operation is done, it's going to call that function. So we want to do some I/O, and then we want to do some database stuff. So inside of this callback, we have our call to do some database stuff. Now, essentially what's happening is it's going to, if we're talking about Node.js here, it's going to do some I/O, whatever that may be, and then it's going to call this function, which on top of that is going to do some database stuff after that. Now, nothing really crazy right now, but what is crazy is that I can now do a little bit of something else while that is happening. While Node.js is accessing the file system or doing something database-wise, I can do something else. And since it's not in that callback there, they'll pretty much run in parallel, which is kind of cool. So now that's the basics of Node.js. We'll have time for questions later if some of this is a little bit confusing. I know it could be a little bit confusing, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you, we're going to go into some examples of some pretty cool stuff you can do with Node.js. Now, if you guys, at the beginning of this, some of you saw this chat application, right? And some of you were having a pretty good time with it. Now, this chat application is actually written in Node.js, of course. And what's really cool about it is Node.js handles lots of little requests at the same time really easily. So we've actually written this in WebSockets. So as you're connecting, nice. As you're connecting, you're all on the same. You're all connecting to the same server at the same time, and it's actually really easy to do this. So we're actually going to go to GitHub. Yep, it's over here. Yeah, we're going to try to go to GitHub. And node chat. So if we look at the app.js, it's actually really simple. There's nothing really crazy going on. It's just make it bigger. Is this the right thing? There we go. Is this the right thing? Aha. So if we go to the final branch here, and we look at our app.js, it's actually not too complicated. So what's happening at the top here is I mentioned something called Npm before, and Npm is a repository of packages that you can include. They're called modules, and basically there's pretty much a module for anything you could need. Express is a module that's just a basic web server. It wraps a lot of Node.js's HTTP module and just makes it simpler to use. And then Socket.io is really what we're interested in here, though, because Socket.io allows you to easily use WebSockets. And it even goes as far as, in order to set it up on the client side, all you have to do is include a file and write some code. It's pretty simple. So this app.get is just a get route. So in this case, the slash is an archive kind of thing. And then at the bottom here is the real juicy part. So when a socket comes in on a connection, it listens for something called a message. And whenever it gets a message, it adds it to the archive first. And then the io.sockets.emits actually emits that data to all connected sockets. And in 10 lines of code, you have a chat server, basically. On the client side, you're doing the same thing. You're just listening and accepting messages. And that's basically the whole chat server. If we go to public, I'll just show you what is on the client side here. So on the client side, it's just a simple module. There's some initialization stuff where you connect to the socket. It's pretty simple stuff. And then this down here is actually the really cool part. So socket on message. So you basically have a pub sub, a publish subscribe method that on the server you have it, and on the client you have it. So whenever the server gets a message, it sends it out to all the sockets, and it runs this new function, which is just some jQuery to add the message to the board there. And then you have a send, which actually just posts to an endpoint. Now this is really interesting, but I'm sure most of you have heard of Node.js, know a lot about sockets. You've probably heard about sockets and stuff like that. Excuse me. But you probably don't know you can do some other cool stuff, like you can actually build your project out with that. So if I swipe over here, yeah, I'm pulling down.
So how many of you build or front-end developers? How many are front-end developers in here? Kind of assume most of you.
Yeah, most.
How many of you have used Yalman before? Okay. Bauer. All right, even fewer. All right, this is good then. What Richard's about to jump into is using the power of Node and Npm to build in this case, a bunch of front-end assets, compile them, put them together, compress them, minify them, and we can take all of the things that we've been using on the front end and tie them together in a nice, easy package.
It is not pulling. Are we connected to the internet?
Okay. What's the name of that thing?
It's grunt. Is it going to merge it?
No. Sorry, guys. And then,
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
and then check it out.
Yeah.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, it's called me. Oops. All right. Okay, so in Grunt, what you can do is it's basically just a build utility. So we've jumped from a chat client to a build utility, and we're still using Node.js, by the way. We're still using Node.js for this. So what we have is this configuration file, and it's a little bit of JavaScript in there, but it's basically just a configuration file. What we're going to do is we're actually going to uglify some JS. I have Zepto, for those of you who know Zepto, and I have underscore. I'm going to concatenate and uglify those so they look horrible and can't be read, but they are very small. And we're going to compile a less file, which is a Sass. I'm sorry, we're compiling a Sass file. And then we're going to copy over just a static image. So just for reference, if we go to source, and then, so as you can see, it's pretty sassy. It's got all kinds of crazy Sass things in it. We're going to compile that. We're going to copy over Rainbow Dash's picture, because we all like Rainbow Dash, right? And then we're just going to go ahead and uglify and compile a thing. What's really cool about this is we actually only have to run, first what we're going to do is we're going to make sure Grunt is installed. So we're going to npm install -g. What this is going to do is it's going to pull down Grunt from the npm repository and install it. And the -g means it's installed globally. So what we're basically doing is we're installing a command line utility right now is what we're doing. So we're connected. Yeah. So it's just going to go, it's going to talk to the npm registry, and it's going to go ahead and get it. And once we have it installed, we actually just have to run one command, grunt. We don't have to give it a file. We don't have to give it anything else. We just say grunt, and it reads that file and compiles everything up. It's on. Okay. So we'll just assume grunt's installed. We do npm install. So if you just go npm install, what it's going to do is it's going to read a package.json file. And I'll open that up so you can see it. It's just a file that has dependencies, requirements, that kind of thing in it. So Grunt itself actually moved from it kind of bundled everything together at one point, and now you have to install all of its dependencies and workers that it does separately. So that's why you see all this output here. We're just installing some Grunt things. So we actually had a successful run of our Grunt. So as you can see, it uglified everything into source.min, and then it compressed our CSS into styles.css, and then it copied over one file. So if we go over to our source, we have a build folder now, and then our source is actually uglified quite well, actually. And then we have our styles, which look completely different now. They've been compiled. They've been compiled all together, and that's basically Grunt in a nutshell, which is something you can do. Now, Grunt is pretty much a command line utility, and it's not that far to jump from a command line utility to something like a script. Now remember that Node.js is just V8. That's at its core, it's just a V8 interpreter, which means we can actually make some pretty cool scripts, not servers, not build tools, but just a script you can run every day, use every day. So if we check out the scripts branch, go over, and look at script.js. So you may notice that the only really big difference between this file and just a JavaScript file you would see on the client side is at the very, very top we include something called FS. And that is the built-in file system utility for Node.js. So we actually don't have any external dependencies right now. We're just using Node.js at Node.js core. And what I did here is I wrote a little needle in a haystack script, as I like to call it. It's just a find utility. Unix users and Windows users, everybody has a nice find utility, but this script actually demonstrates how easy it is to make a really awesome script using just Node.js. So what it's going to do is it's going to loop through a couple of things. It's going to loop through a directory for a file you give it. So if we go over to the command line and we do node script.js, and then we give it a directory, so // for current directory, and then script.js, it found script.js. So in contrast, if we gave it just something that doesn't exist, it should just exit. So as you can tell, that kind of thing is actually really useful, because unlike a search tool, you can actually start building all kinds of really cool scripts to do all kinds of things. At Modules, we actually have scripts to do everything from update users to move projects if we need to move a project, that kind of thing. And the FS module is actually a really awesome built-in module, because it can give you, it can recursively look in directories, it can get the stats on a file. This line right here, I actually added today when I was going over the script, and what that is doing is we found out that if there were too many symbolic links in a folder, our script would actually have a very big hissy fit and crash. So the stats object actually has, among other things, is a directory, is a file, that kind of thing. But it also has is symbolic link. So with just one little if statement, I've removed all symbolic links from my search, which is kind of cool. But I think Charlie actually has a really awesome command line, a whole command line actually.
So we talked a little bit about scripts. So what happens when you start to put all of these scripts together and you want a tool that you can use on a regular basis, and maybe you want to give it out and let other people use it too. At Modulus, we do this actually with our command line tool. It's a Npm module that you can install on any computer, and it's just a Node.js project that runs a bunch of different scripts in a command line tool. Grunts the same way. And what we're going to do is we'll check out kind of what that looks like. So kind of the first thing I wanted to show off here is, again, we're using the power of NPM to use and add functionality to our application. In this case, we're using a module called Commander. It's written by a gentleman named TJ Holowichuk, who has written all kinds of amazing stuff for Node and other languages in the past. And in this case, what we're doing is something rather stupid, but that's how examples are. We're just building a command line tool to order a pizza, and our command line tool, we can add peppers to it, we can add pineapple, we can add barbecue sauce and pick our cheese. So by default, we run our little thing, and let me fix the line endings first. All right. Nothing happens. So what we want to do is we want to actually try to order our pizza. So let's order our pizza here. All right, we ordered a small pizza with marble cheese. Well, if we take a look back over here, we can actually start ordering different pizzas with different sizes. We'll look down here, and on our command, we have an optional size that gets passed in, and we can use that to make some decisions on. We have our options that we declared up here, peppers, pineapple, barbecue sauce, and we can start to build some real functionality in what our pizza looks like. Now, we've got our pizza, our small pizza with the peppers, pineapples, and marble cheese. Now maybe we want a large pizza, Oops. And you have to put it in the right order. Now we have a large pizza. But, you can continue to add new commands, and then maybe you want to catch what happens if something else happens. So we have our catch-all, and we can kind of build everything out from there. Now, like I said, this can really grow up to be a very big command line utility. Like ours, for instance, does all kinds of different things. The Modules command line utility is used for our platform where you deploy your applications and everything. But again, more interesting things. Let's take care of what's important. Some of you may not be into that, so let's take care of you too. And then, for at least the 1% I know out there that loves, what is it?
Bro.
For all of the bronies out there that need a little bit of everything else. So that, some fun stuff. Your command line utilities give you all the functionality that you kind of want. So where do we go from here? Well, let's look at something completely wildly different. Let's look at audio. Well, okay, so we've got things that allow us to do crazy audio, and we can start to build sounds and play them through our computer here. Whatever. Wow. Oh my goodness. Stop doing things. I know.
You check out that.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So audio. So a gentleman named Substack has created a set of audio Npm modules that allow us to do kind of all kinds of crazy different things. But we're going to start off very simple. And I apologize for how annoying this is going to be. All right, and we got to stop that now. All right. That's those 9 lines of code. That outputs that wonderful sound that we get. We can start to do different sounds. So maybe we want something a little bit different here. We get a little bit. All right. We get a little bit different sound, a little bit more pleasant. Maybe something you hear in your 8-bit games of old. And then we can kind of go off the deep end and start to really play around with what sine waves and different math components can make in an audio format. Now, if you ask me, for 25 lines of code, that's pretty amazing. I mean, we've got interesting audio coming out of my laptop with 25 lines of JavaScript. Now, there's almost nowhere you could have done that before. The two things that one that I'll talk about a little bit right now. Npm has really made a lot of this possible. Npm is the core of what the community adds to Node.js. A guy named Isaac Schluter, who literally is in charge of Node.js at its core from day to day, invented this repository for how we handle modules and everything. From people who come from the Ruby world, you had Ruby gems for a long time, and everyone else is kind of catching up in that world and adding more and more kind of modular repositories where people can take pieces of functionality and add them together to build amazing things. Npm is not only huge for the community, it's been growing insanely fast. You can't see because it's extremely small, but now you can see over the last month, over 100 million modules have been downloaded from Npm. This just a year ago, we were looking at 20 million a month. This is growing at an incredible rate, but we don't just care about the how many times they're downloaded. We care about the total amount of packages. 44,000 different ways to use JavaScript to build unique applications. And how has this kind of grown over the last, since January 2012? This is what that rapid adoption of Npm has shown us. People are building new things every day. There's literally almost nothing you can think of and you go out there and look for, and there's probably 2 or 3 different ways that people have built it and used it. And this goes for the community as a whole. The Node.js community is amazing. They're always helpful. They're always there to help you out, answer your questions, and great people to spend time with. If you ever go to a Node conference, definitely check them out. Now, kind of the last 2 things that I kind of wanted to show off, and then we'll do some questions. One is a tool called Browserify. So everybody here works on the client side for the most part, and that's what we're at HTML5 conference to talk about it a little bit. So how does Node.js and Npm come into this world? Well, some guys that are really smart came up with some cool ways to take the technology that we're using in Node.js and allow you to use the same way that we build applications using this require and everything, and the functionality that you get with Npm and the modules there, and give it to us on the browser side. Browse. All right. So Browserify is a set of tools that allow us to take our client-side code and build it like we would build our back-end code, or anything in Node.js, for instance. So we take a look at this. This is going to be our client-side code, and I will increase that quite a bit. We see it looks very similar to the other pieces of code that we've had here. We include a local module. We can use the / to include our own modules. We include a npm module, gamma, and then we generate a number, and then we generate some text, and we put that text in our document. Now, rather contrived, but something that we care about is how this all comes together. So we'll take a look at foo. Foo is our module. It literally just returns a number, and this allows us to do some functionality that we see over there. So how does this come together? Well, what we can do is we can take all of this and we can use to combine this main. We take this main file, it'll automatically figure out what's needed on the dependencies, tie all those together, and then we'll output it into our public into a single file called bundle. Now what we've got is, if we jump back over here, we've got our bundled code. Now this has everything that's needed to run that piece of code that we have, and we can use it on the client side. So we jump over and we can see that we've got our little output here. And you can see it a little bit. So what we'll do real quick is, just to make sure this isn't made up and I'm not faking it all, we'll go in and we'll change this a little bit, and we'll just change the number that we're passing in here to 5. And you can see here our value is 1.45. We can increase that a little bit. We've got this number. That was what when we passed 2. We'll recompile this here. And now we've got infinity. So we've taken a lot of the same things we've learned about over the last 25 minutes, and we can use those on the client side. So where can you go with this? Where can you go with this kind of functionality? Well, some of the guys decided to take it as far as they could, and what they built was a game engine for building Minecraft-esque voxel kind of applications, voxel.js. Voxel.js is built on a bunch of Npm modules that allow you to build all kinds of game, virtual world type things. We've got some here. What we'll do is we'll jump in and take a look at one of these. Let's see if it'll reload, if we have nice enough network. Wait for that over there. But we can see here, maybe we can see here, all of the different things that you can kind of do in that world. So let's jump in and start playing around here. This is all client-side code here, and we've got a whole little virtual world that we can kind of jump around and play in. And this is just the start. This is all put together with Npm modules and powered by Node. So that's pretty cool. Minecraft's a big thing. We're looking at some Minecraft-esque stuff. What one gentleman decided to do, he's decided to write an entire Minecraft server in Node.js. So we can also run our Minecraft server in Node.js with one module called JSMC. We can just spin up a Minecraft server, open my Minecraft here, and then we can join the server, and you can see I've joined my Node.js server, and you can see that all my data is starting the stream for Node.js, and we've kind of done a full 360, and now we're back on the server and using all kinds of fun stuff. I'm tired of this though. So those are some of the kinds of things that people are doing with Node.js, and the different wide range of why you should be going out there and trying it out. Node.js allows developers like yourselves that understand JavaScript to build insanely complex projects that are, we didn't even get to talk about scaling, easy to scale. You know, that's one of the great things about Node is it's got this ability to scale very horizontally and handle big amounts of load. We talked about Walmart earlier. We talked about LinkedIn. They're running billions of requests every month through Node.js systems that they rely on. When you hit up Walmart.com, you know, you're gonna run through a Node.js server at some point. So these are the kind of things that are being done in Node.js and why it's amazing. Why you guys should definitely be checking it out. JavaScript developers are everywhere. We're taking over the world. And Node.js is just one of the tools that help us get there. Open for questions.
What's the primary method for debugging in Node?
Debugging?
Debugging Node.
So the question was, what is the primary method of debugging? Node.js has a built-in debugger, which is okay. What I would say is, what I think the best way to do debugging in Node is called Node Inspector, which actually uses, and I doubt we're going to have a connection for me to bring this up. Node Inspector, what it does is it'll actually connect to the Chrome debugger. Hey, look at that. So you can debug it like you would be debugging your client-side code. So you're using the same Chrome debugger that you're going to be able to use for all of your client-side code. The same JavaScript inspector. Same. You can set your breakpoints, hit breakpoints on your server while playing around in your kind of Chrome tools. That's a huge deal. Go ahead.
So there's also Eclipse. A lot of you probably heard of Eclipse. It ties into the native Node.js debugger quite well for debugging. And I've actually used personally something called WebStorm from JetBeans. I think it's from JetBeans. That has a awesome Node.js integration, including debugging. So you can use Node Inspector, which is a really great tool. I agree with Charlie; it's a really awesome tool. But if you're looking for like an IDE level, something like Microsoft would provide, it'd be like Eclipse or WebStorm would do that as well.
Yes?
Can you tell us 5 or 6 Npm modules that you use all the time that you recommend because there are 44,000?
Yeah. So from the top to bottom, kind of the modules that I recommend people to check out is Express. For anybody who's worked in the Ruby world, Sinatra, it's the base of how we build most websites and other pieces. Express is way up there. You look at probably Jade or Handlebars for your templates if you're looking at a website. Socket.io is a big one for doing the real-time communication stuff. Async, which is a module for helping handle, we talked about callbacks, and what happens is you're going to build up a whole chain of callbacks. Async will let you kind of flatten that out a little bit. Other people like Promises. What's the Promises library that you like, Matt? Q. The letter Q is a great one. What else?
That's actually.
I mean, that's a huge kind of core set of the problems you're going to be trying to solve.
Those 4 modules right there, you may not even need a 5th. Those 4 right there will solve pretty much all the problems you have.
Yeah, and then you get into very specific kind of things. Other questions?
Does it work well with like a particular database engine or any of them?
So it's database engines. MongoDB, a lot of people use. There's a really good ORM called Mongoose. That's not going to bring up the right thing, I don't think. Mongoose is a great node ORM for MongoDB. There we go. The other ones are going to be like Redis for caching and everything, CouchDB, MySQL's there. There's actually guys building databases in Node.js now, kind of using Node.js as a engine for building databases too. A bunch of those are based off of LevelDB type databases. But most everything, Postgres, any database you're going to connect to on a regular basis, there's easy drivers to use for all that stuff. Anything else? Thank you all. We're from Modulus. We're hiring. Come and talk to us.